What is happening? What's going on, right? Like, I know we've all been watching this season of My Hero Academia, and at first, I had nothing but praise for this season. I was so excited for how the season was going. It was looking great. The Mirko sections were handled really well. Of course, they knew that they had to do really good on that. But in this episode of My Hero Academia, like, you're kind of expecting like a climactic episode to the war, right? I mean, the war is not necessarily over after this, but this is the big battle between Shigaraki and Deku. And I don't know, I just don't feel like this episode really lived up to my expectations for what we were going to see in this fight, especially with all the energy that we saw in the manga. But let's talk about it, and let's talk about My Hero Academia Season 6, Episode 9, is it? Is it 9? So the episode starts off with Aizawa realizing that he has indeed been hit by the Quirk Erasing Bullet thanks to the warning by Ryukyu. So in that split second, you already saw at the end of last episode that he was pulling out the knife that he always carries around with him, but he hasn't really ever had a use for. And he pulls out the knife and immediately cuts off his leg. Now, the reasoning here is much like a zombie bite, let's say, in something like The Walking Dead. Aizawa assumes that if he gets hit in a limb by the Quirk Erasing Bullet, quickly cutting off that limb before the effects of the Quirk Erasing Bullet can spread to the rest of his body will allow him to keep his quirk, just at the cost of his leg. And as Aizawa is doing the act of cutting his leg off, we do see flashes to Eri, right, who is someone that Aizawa is constantly in the care of, and he wants to make sure that he stays alive and stays safe and stays capable of protecting Eri, usually by using his quirk, right, to make sure that her quirk doesn't go out of control. Now, it does seem like Aizawa is able to save himself from the effect of the Quirk Erasing Bullets, but Shigaraki does use that one little moment of distraction to get to Aizawa and put his hands right on his face, really start digging his hands into Aizawa's skull practically, trying to almost scoop Aizawa's eyeballs out. And I could definitely understand the logic of doing that instead of just completely smashing or destroying Aizawa's face, because at the end of the day, if Shigaraki was able to maybe take Aizawa's eyeballs, right, and have the effect kind of not go on him, I wonder if he could steal Aizawa's quirk from the eyeballs. That's something that I don't think we've seen ever tried before in the series, but that would be an interesting thing. At least that I think what Shigaraki would think to do. Like, I'm gonna take the eyes, right? I'm gonna take Mr. Cool Aizawa's eyes, and hey, let's see if I can take the quirk from him. If not, at the very least, I've disabled Aizawa, and now I can use my quirks again. And although Shigaraki does succeed in disabling Aizawa's eyes by scratching down his face, he's interrupted by Shoto and Deku, who put the hurt on him for a second to get him to back away, while ultimately using the confusion to get Aizawa and the other teachers and heroes out of the area, getting them away to safety from Shigaraki. Now, Shigaraki instantly realizes, okay, my healing is back, you know, everything is back to normal. I have access to my quirks. Aizawa's out of the picture. Now I can just win this fight by putting my hand on the ground using decay and just wiping everybody away but Deku. But when he goes to do that, his body falls apart. Now, this is where things start looking a little wonky to me in the episode, really, because in the manga, when Shigaraki goes to touch the ground, right, and use decay on Deku and everyone else, his arm or his shoulder and I guess part of his midsection just kind of like separate, like they just fall apart. A large crack kind of forms in Shigaraki's upper shoulder / chest, and it just falls apart. Where here in the anime, you kind of have this weird purple ribbon is coming out of Shigaraki's arm and chest, right? Because they didn't want to show it actually tearing apart. So it just looks like muscle is still connecting it, but in other scenes, it's like growing past. It just looks really stupid. I wish they could just commit to doing Shigaraki's injuries correctly, right? But I guess they can't because of TV restrictions, so they end up censoring it, but even the way they end up censoring it is in like, it's just the ugliest way, right? It's not very creative. They could have did different shots or anything. I don't know. Like, I feel like there was a better way to handle that. That was really, really poorly done. The Shigaraki kind of falling apart section. And I feel like the pacing of the conversation between him and Deku, right, where he asks like, hey, what day is it? That was kind of thrown off a little bit for me. But I did think at least the art for Deku's rage face, right, that he was making when Rocklock was like, hey, you should run away, man, like, stop it, was really good. So I guess there's a silver lining in that kind of wonky scene with the weird, horrible censoring of Shigaraki's injuries. And things didn't really continue to go in a positive direction as the episode went on, right? Because we then continue to have Deku taking everyone up into the air. That scene looked a little wonky, even though I did like the colored text for Deku awakening Nana's quirk, and I did like the scene of Gran Torino and Nana. Jury's still out on if those two are Tenko's grandparents, right? Like, did we ever get any sort of confirmation that there was another dude with Nana, right? Because Gran Torino says our decision was the wrong one, maybe, right? So why would you have any part in that decision? Are you just telling her, get rid of your child because All for One is going to be like a very present thing? Like, was that because he's her mentor kind of, you know what I mean? Or was it more so that like, hey, this is our baby, and look, I also think this is a decision we should make, but I'm going to be pushing for us getting rid of him, right? And it's mysterious because we don't know Gran Torino's original hair color, right? When he was kind of like that middle-aged man with all the white hair, he's still already sort of old in that. He's not necessarily like a young man in that. So maybe Gran Torino's hair was originally black, or even if it's not, you know, Nana's hair is black, so you could see how that would pass on. Even if Gran Torino's hair is a white color, you could see how, you know, that might be like a less dominant. We're really doing this theory right now. I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into it, but let me know if you think that might be possible, right? I remember that was a theory that we had when the manga was out, that Gran Torino might actually have been like Nana's man, right, or something like that, but who knows? Specifically because they keep it so secret, everything surrounding that family, to keep them safe from All for One. But I really liked in the last episode and this episode the sections of Gran Torino. It just reminds me though that he didn't die from the attack that he gets hit from by Shigaraki, even though Night Eye got killed by some random, like, he got Neji'd pretty much, right? And then Gran Torino actually gets punched in the chest full power by an All Might level opponent, or apparently, right, according to the doctor, near All Might level opponent, and he survives. That's kind of on Hori though, honestly. So Deku begins to beat the crap out of Shigaraki, right? We see him just tearing Shigaraki apart, which is what I wish I could say if it didn't just look like a slow motion mess of Deku slowly pulling Shigaraki in with his control of Black Whip and then punching him really hard with a slow punch. Like, it just wasn't it. That wasn't it, Bones. I don't know what y'all were trying there, but that just wasn't it. If y'all had to sacrifice some stuff earlier in the season to get these scenes to look better, maybe you should have did that, right? Because I don't know. I'm expecting quite a bit from a fight from the main character and his main antagonist, right? Like, you expect it to look at least fire, to look great, but we got more out of the section where Deku was wrestling with Shigaraki than we did out of the section where Deku's actually tossing Shigaraki around and just like yo-yoing him, right? The impact of that scene was just completely lost in my opinion. Whereas in the manga, you have it looking like Shigaraki like literally cannot keep up with the barrage of attacks that Deku is doing on him, and Deku is doing so many different attacks and smashes on Shigaraki that he just doesn't know what to do, right? And even with a wide library of quirks at his disposal, with the newly found power of All for One and his amazing new body thanks to the surgery from the doctor, Shigaraki still can't figure out what to do, right? And in the anime, it's just kind of like, wow, yeah, he's really beating me up. Like, he's hitting me really hard, and I'm stuck in the air, and I can't find a quirk that is gonna get him to let go. It's just not the same, you know, it's not the same level of impact. So I definitely feel like it would have been much better if they would have focused on this section of the episode more than any other, or maybe allocated some resources better throughout the season so that here, I don't know, if there was any scheduling conflicts or anything, like, I just think this section should have been handled better, because this is one of the more impactful parts of the season, especially for fans of Deku and Bakugo and Shigaraki, right? This is just like the perfect chance to really show off and gain a lot of fan favor, and they just didn't really hit. It didn't really hit the way it was supposed to. I did like the emotional section of the episode with Bakugo, right? Bakugo finally showing some of his actual true colors and explaining why he bullied Deku, right? Saying that, hey, this guy was always willing to put himself in danger, and he didn't have, you know, he really didn't care about himself, and that kind of put me off. That was off-putting to me as a person who, you know, I'm constantly put in this perfectionist role where I have to be the best. Having someone who doesn't care about themselves, like, next to you, around you, means you constantly have to be worried about them if you're the person that's seen as being the most heroic, or you're the person who's seen as, you know, being the best. So if Deku ever gets into some sort of situation, I always have my eye on him, because, you know, he doesn't care about himself, so someone has to be watching him, and me, who's put myself in this position to be the perfect hero or the best, obviously I have to take on that role, right? I as Bakugo. But it's hard to do that when Deku now has gained so much power that Deku has kind of gone far and above anything that Bakugo is capable of. So Bakugo, who was sort of thrust into this sort of protector role, is charged with protecting this person who he really can't catch up to or protect any longer due to the advancement of One for All in Deku's body. So it puts Bakugo in a really desperate situation where he needs to call on the #1 hero and he needs to call on Todoroki to go and try and save Deku. And ultimately, it puts him in a situation where his body moves before he can even think about it, finally coming full circle and seeing life through Deku's shoes, right? And this is all part of Bakugo's character journey. Bakugo and Deku start in very opposite places in this series, but now Bakugo has finally reached the point that Deku was in that first episode, right? Where Deku's body moved on its own to save Bakugo. That's finally where Bakugo is, right? And as you're going to see as the season continues and as the series continues, Bakugo is now very much going to undergo that character journey that Deku went through to ultimately become a better person and get that other side, right? Of save to win, win to save. They both have to kind of learn from each other. And Deku's definitely showcasing here more than ever that he has a very Bakugo-like mindset, or at least a past Bakugo mindset, where he's very much in a place that Bakugo was at in the very first episodes, where Bakugo thought he could handle anything by himself, he could take anything on, he would injure his body by like using his explosives and injuring his arms. Deku is there, and Bakugo is where Deku was in the first episodes. So I like how both of their stories have kind of come full circle, but for the other person. And I like how that's going to continue into next episode as we see what happens after Shigaraki has injured Bakugo at the end of this episode. Like I said, Bakugo's body moved on its own, and he moves into an attack that Shigaraki is planning to use on Deku, sending spikes all through Bakugo's body. So how is Bakugo going to recover from this situation, and how is Deku going to turn up on Shigaraki? Now, this is another moment that a lot of people have really high expectations for, because it is pretty much Deku's biggest rage moment in the entire series, and in the next episode preview, it kind of doesn't look like all that hype, honestly, right? It doesn't look all that crazy, so here's hoping that's just like them not showing us the hype part of the next episode and the next episode preview. But when awesome cuts are happening, they tend to give us a little bit, right, the next episode preview. So that doesn't give me a lot of hope for next episode, but if it's bad, I guess we'll be right here again talking about it. So that is this week's episode discussion for My Hero Academia Season 6, Episode 9, I believe. I'm still not 100% sure. I think it is Episode 9, though. And yeah, keep your eye out on the channel, because today I will also be talking about, I believe this video is coming out today, it's probably finished by now, Asta versus Deku, right? We got a little preview from Death Battle showing off some of the animation for the Asta versus Deku Death Battle, and I kind of wanted to talk over who I think would win in a battle between both of the characters without going too deep into like crazy power scaling. I'll leave that to someone else to do, but I'm just going to give my opinion as a fan of both of the characters. So look out for that Asta versus Deku kind of discussion, or at least my pre-battle thoughts of what's going to happen. And yeah, I love you guys. It's Pineapple. Nice seeing you again. Peace.